So we're live on Facebook, and I think the easiest way to go live on Facebook is actually just using your cell phone, because you really don't have an opportunity to go live on your laptop. It doesn't necessarily work that way. It's so great. But we really need to have a conversation in regards to just where we are in America today and where we've been for a long time. You know, I can look back and understand what the 60s meant. I remember 1969 when we went to Japan and we were over there for 4 years. And I remember when we came back to America when we were living in Texas. We went to Lubbock, Texas, and my dad was stationed at Reserve Force Base, and the reality of just coming from Japan and outside country, coming back to America, it was different. It was truly just different. Because in America, things were happening that truly I had no idea that was going on. And the reality of, just how it is for so many of us, it's just real. You have a quality life and you have the ability to live a quality life if your parents have established themselves and you got an education. And in the military, children are educated. They're educated to the point where they can survive. They have definite skills. And they understand from looking from the outside in because they've actually lived away, And when you look at what's happening in most small cities and most small towns, there are people that never left a city block. That's where they've been their whole lives. Yet and still, the advocacy for, looking at the world globally versus locally is so different. It's insanity. So a lot of the people who choose to get elected to public office, they take care of their family and friends. That's why, what's her, Marsha, what's her name? God dang, it was on the tip of my tongue. But the woman who went to prison, that now partners with Snoop Dogg and has a line of home products or whatever. But, it just emboldened her career. She started doing better. And then her hookup with Snoop Dogg and understanding that she really went down with people, everyday people, was real. And so, I don't know why I can't think of her name, but it's just real. When we look at the world through our eyes and understand what Bill Cosby and the Cosby Show brought to us as growing up, as children, I could see some similarities in my family as to how his family was operating. But we weren't wealthy, but we had the ability to sustain ourselves. We had everything we needed growing up. What we have to understand is that so many people don't have their bare minimums met. And so when you're looking at people who don't have bare necessities and understanding that their children have to participate. I don't know how this works, but I don't know. If people want to be in the room, just ask me and I'll add you, because the conversation is among everyday citizens. And we all have to choose to stand up and be heard. The message from Michael Jackson, meaning that they don't really care about us, that was the message of his next evolution. But it was a message that people chose for him not to carry. And so that last song was a visionary message. It starts off with a baby and a snotty nose standing on the street and whining. Then it goes into, just the chaos around, right now, the rioting, Rodney King, the beating. And then it goes into the prison. And it just mass incarceration of African American people. And we're not the largest subgroup in the nation. Yet and still, as a people, we generate tons and tons of monies that come back to local communities. And I watched at Ferguson, I watched that intensely as it was going down. And understand that the city council was so busy during that time issuing 99-year contracts. Come on now. Contracts and services of public dollars that are coming back to the local community. They ensured that whoever was working at that time, those jobs were maintained. Even if the city council did change hands, it was not going to change hands. It was not going to change hands on their watch. And so, even though they're not at the city council anymore, those companies are making that money. So here we are. This is the year 2024. Many people don't even understand how public services operate. And then when we have young artists who are generating and having to pay $100,000 in taxes. I've never made $100,000 in my lifetime, but people are paying $100,000 in taxes. These are young rap artists that are selling, the P word. They're privates. They're entertaining the mind to have a sexual relationship with people who think that they should have one with you just because you exist. That's not reality. We live in a world where reality has no real function, where people are making money based on our children and just reaping the harvest because our children are not getting a basic education. And in a community where we live, the children and the parents have no voices because they don't understand the power in the law. There is power in the rules and the regulations because that's how we operate. We operate under the United States Constitution. And then my dad was in the Air Force and he served his 26 years or more. Or maybe, the real deal is he got full retirement. And he was able to sustain our family. And we had a quality life because he believed in family outings and we had picnics and we did family events. But there are families out there that don't even communicate well. I happen to be living in Las Vegas where I'm my neighbor and who is 87 and she has a boyfriend who is she's 87 and he is 86 or something like that. But the real reality is her children felt that she did not need to be in the house with him. So they took her to California, tried to establish residency, and she was crying every day. Every day she called, she was crying. And I just couldn't help it anymore. I had to get involved. And when I got involved, they brought that woman home and she was able to be with her mate. And that's where she wants to stay. But the daughters didn't stop. They went to the point of trying to do an immediate conservatorship and try to make her a resident of California. But guess what? She owns a home here. That didn't work because everybody going through something in America has a right to be heard. And we in America have a right to be heard. Our public services are just totally broken. This COVID really revealed some things. We pay taxes to ensure that the allocations of public services are represented by the number of people who are living in a community. And larger cities generate more funds for support for community members. And guess who gets to benefit from those public services? Well, quite frankly, it's the people who choose to step up. It's the people who are heard, the voices of people who operate under nonprofits. And pretty soon you got quite a lot of people who are scurrying around and making a living off the backs of the people who are receiving public services. And some families have 20 different service providers based on the stuff, the crappy stuff that they made choices in, and not basically understanding that the real reality in America is that you are on your own. You're on your own in America to understand what the rules say. And the rules apply to all of us. And they're the same rules for all of us. But yet and still they don't work for you if you can't read and write. They don't work for you if you can't enforce them. They don't work for you if you're not being heard. And actually, when I left Sacramento, I was renting under LGL Properties. She was my renter and I had a Section 8 voucher. And during the time, I hadn't planned on leaving Sacramento at the time I left. But, the deal is that I have a son who has a disability. And, that was part of what happened to me when I was working for Los Rios, because I was working in a toxic environment. And, toxicity in your body is really real. When you get chemicals in your body and your body can't get rid of them, it's kind of like it comes out in different ways. But irregardless, let's move on. My son gets Social Security, and so do I. He gets my Social Security, part of my money. And so the real deal is that I was there for him every step of the way. And he was successful. They said he was severely mentally retarded, communication handicapped, and would not ever engage in society. But ultimately, the deal was he graduated with a 1-on-1 aid, a laptop, and above proficient. And every time I had an IEP meeting, we talked about the maintenance of effort. And what is the maintenance of effort? You have to demonstrate that the children are making progress, meaningful progress. And then the federal government says for children who are in special education, they have the same rights as children who are non-disabled. So they have the same rights. And it also says, the federal government says, that your child has a right to meet the same levels as every other person that is their age, quite frankly. And so, it's age-appropriate content. But in Sacramento, California, where there's been little or no public engagement in the process, and I remember we went through the process of lobbying to ensure that all of the people who were participating in the ability to, to look at the oversight, to look at the outcomes in education. There were people who weren't demanding those outcomes, and the outcomes were negative for the Black community. There is very little, although we have gifted people, there are very little outcomes for people in poverty who are in public schools. Because guess what? The people who make money, who have money, and who are living life are living their lives. And quite frankly, the people who are living their lives don't have time to deal with you. I mean, if you ain't heard Snoop Dogg's "I'm living my best life, ain't got time to deal with you niggas," I think you heard it, because it's something we party to in the club. And he is living his best life, and he doesn't have time to deal with us. And why should he? But all of us can see, all of us can understand the Kobe experience, and we all went through it as Americans. Everyone can understand the loss of someone so gifted in a talented area. That's how you're successful in life. You're successful by the gifts that God gave you. And we have some successful artists, entertainers. We have successful sports individuals. We pay taxes in America. And how that money comes back to local communities is what I don't get, how people don't understand how it really happens. Because people get to choose and create the environment. The people who get to choose and create the environment are the people who choose to step up. And the people who are politically linked or legislatively linked to community people, well, those agencies come up. But for the people who are working there hard every day and paying those taxes, well, they ain't got time. Too busy trying to make a living to understand that if they don't lobby for support of their children, and they're not showing up to ensure that their children are making meaningful progress, that the letter grade of A means absolutely nothing when you're in a program that measures your maintenance of effort by your willful defiance issues. Because if a parent has agreed to having a behavior opportunity for education, that's all they get, And behavior is a form of the offer of faith. The offer of faith is a free and appropriate public education based on the parent's request, based on the parent's level of knowledge, based on the parent's ability to engage in the process. If you can't read, write, communicate effectively, then you're not going to get anything. And that's just real. You'll get what's there. And some people are lucky enough and blessed enough to stay above the fray, to benefit regardless. I mean, if you have a skill, you can make it in America. But if you are skillless, I'm just wondering what the hell we think about this. I'm trying to understand. I mean, I've been supporting people and made no difference actually, except for to document that the system is dysfunctional. And that's real. Every IEP meeting that I've had with certain families would produce nothing. You know why? Because those children still never had homework. And so we have to look at the educational system to understand what's happened over time. And you wouldn't know what's happened over time if you weren't in the room with me. And there were very few. There might have been people sitting on the bench behind the dais. But the real thing is that there are so few people who look like me, who hold people accountable, who are speaking and based on people's rights, human rights. And so, this COVID thing that happened was a godsend, because there were children as young as 8 years old committing suicide for the horrible places that their minds had to be and their inability to progress in life at 8 years old. What do you know at 8? How do you know if you're bisexual at 2? Well, maybe you do, and maybe you don't. But the years of learning should be all about academic, not about pleasures. It should be about the maintenance of effort, not about sexual nature. The years of education should be teaching people how to think, how to be creative, how to engage and learn a skill, how to be successful, how to make $1. But it ain't about that. It's all about, he wasn't sitting up straight in the chair. He leaned back. I had a teacher to knock my son off the chair, pushed him backwards, trying to teach him that it was so dangerous. Was that a real lesson that we got? It was a lesson that I got to understand that I must be there to protect my children. And I had all boys. God gave me young men to raise because for whatever reason, a lot of black men think that black women can't raise black men. But guess what? It was a black woman behind every successful black man. And that's what life's about, knowing who you are and knowing how to stand up for yourself. And guess what? If something happens in the midst of standing up, God will make it for the good. The universe will turn it for the better. And so here we are, George Floyd, but we've seen so many other criminal behaviors from people who we should assume that our citizenship rights make a difference, that we are blessed to have a voice, because that's what you get in life. You get a body with a brain, and the brain somehow is supposed to absorb all of these things while you are learning. And trials and tribulations in life come from your life lessons. But if you're not willing to fight the battle, you ain't going nowhere. You'll be stuck in that place. And I remember I used to go to Phil Godot's church over there. And, you know, if I didn't learn anything, I learned about the storehouse. And I learned about who was the top dog in that storehouse. And I learned about selling hope. And I understand this in life, that you will be put through some things. But if you live through it, you will be able to share how you did it. And if someone's looking, they may be brought to you to understand how to get through that stuff. Because sometimes it really just stinks and you just cannot fight the battle. And so here we are, 2020, and what do we have? We have devices. Devices in which we can share and communicate across the universe is where we are. And every country had something to say about what happened to George Floyd in America. You know what they said? America's got their foot in everybody else's ass to ensure that they are living up to their standards of how it was supposed to be, how we were supposed to be released, how we are supposed to be equals, how we fought in America, and how people who look like me have participated in every single war. And you know, there is a video that shows every single war in America, how many black men were sent out there in the front of everybody. First, to protect who? Come on now. We're protecting a vision. The vision is of freedom. Freedom costs. Freedom doesn't come when you sit back and you think it's going to happen for you by yourself. Nothing's happening for you if you're not acting on it. And we've been given everything we need. If you have a sense of mind and a sense of purpose, you are equipped. If you're willing to fight the battle, you can stand up. No one has to lay down and be abused. You subject yourself to abuse, you got to stand up and get out of it. It just, you know, if you're in a negative situation, I think you all see it. You know what's wrong. How do you get out of it? You just stand up. And that's what you have to do. You have to stand through oppression. And here we are standing today. COVID 2020, and it's real. The virus is real. It's not going away. People just can't say, oh, it's going to be over, and somehow it's going to be over. It's just not going to be over. There are boards and commissions of every facet of public services. There are people, human people, who participate in allocating those human resources because they're your tax dollars. And if we're not going to stand up, then we have to live with why America is initially separated from England, or whatever, Europe. It was, what was it? Taxation without representation. And, you know, and it's just real. They felt that they were not being represented by breaking away. But then they brought on, and they said, you come to America, you get to have all these resources. And they brought black people over here to help serve and help, whatever. But then they stopped using black people, and they start using Chinese, and they stop using Chinese, and they start using Mexicans. But it really doesn't matter, because this is a nation where we're all equally equal. But you ain't equal if you ain't got no education. You can't participate if you can't say you have a level of education that allows you to, to operate. Because if you don't know the rules, you can't play the game. And that's just real. And playing the game seems to be everything. Because the process will go on without you. It really doesn't need you. But what it does need, it needs your babies. So in looking at where we are today, I challenge anyone across America to ask for the data to see how well all black children are being successful and where they're not. We need to ask what's going on, because there is something called the May Revise, and in the May Revise they may allocate hundreds of thousands of dollars to an educational agency, and they may put that money in the program where those people are, where those high poverty people are. But then, if they don't use it by May, they get to rewrite that money and send it where they want to send it. And you know who's doing that? People who want to keep their jobs. Employed people. People who have the best job in the world, public education. Because in public education, you get 3 months off in the year, every summer. And then you also get every holiday off, paid for. And then you get retirement, and then you get health care. But if you're working in an agency where you have 90% failure, then I think you better check yourself. Because now the COVID has exposed you, and none of your kids were being successful. And so, hey, how can you say you're going to get an equal opportunity in life if you never had a beginning, is what I want to know. I mean, there are resources out there. Like I encourage Cheryl McNeil, who's watching, to do a corporation and national community service, the Corporation for National Community Service, to become a VISTA, to give back to the federal government so you understand how the government works. Everybody has to understand that there are opportunities out there, but if you're not taking advantage of them, well, the opportunity is not just going to run to you. It's just not. I would have thought that my children, I have one son that I know would be great in the Peace Corps. But, it's about getting him acclimated into understanding how government works. We all have to understand that we are who we've been looking for. That man in the mirror that Michael Jackson was talking about is so real. Some of the music, what's going on? Marvin Gaye, hey, what's going on? Because I have to ask myself, what's happening around me when people who look like me are struggling to find basic support for their children, but they allow their children to continue to be promoted from grade level to grade level without reaching grade level proficiency. And if you're not at grade level proficiency, guess what? That grade level that you're in, it don't make no difference, because you're not doing that. You're not doing the work. And then pretty soon you don't have any homework, and then pretty soon you're just showing up, and people are getting a paycheck, because that's how it works. If there's the accountability for public services are the people. And the COVID has brought to forefront so many things that are happening, and so many things that are happening wrongly. I mean, you can't keep on killing people. And the boldness of the game to just arrest young black people because if they're out there in the nighttime, that they got to be doing something wrong. Well, everybody wants to have the same thing. They all want to have those Xboxes and Game Boys and phones, expensive phones and tennis shoes. Everything they see on TV, the children want. But if you can't provide a way for them to get it, and they can see how they can get it another way, they're going to try it. And that's just real. Who are we to think that, people don't have desires, even if they don't have skills? God has gifted so many people. And, I never knew anything about Nipsey Hussle. And then, there's Old Town Road, that song, Old Town Road. But the whole thing is that song was combined with a country western singer and a gay black young boy. And, the message was, hey. But Nipsey Hussle said, we have to talk about a lawsuit. We have to talk about what's happening to our people. And he was spreading the message. We need to understand that we're paying for services that are not benefiting our people. And locally, nationally, we have no way to demand accountability except for coming together. And we can't seem to all come together and get in the same damn room, because guess what? Everybody has a different experience in life, but God made it that way. That's how come we have the quilts. When you make a quilt, and during the slavery days, they used to hang the quilts out to tell people, and people used to pay attention to what was written on the quilt to know when it was safe to run. I mean, the message is in the message. And the message now is that if you have children and grandchildren, which I don't have, I'm blessed to have a 35-year-old, 36-year-old, 33-year-old, 23-year-old, have children, don't have children when they haven't found their foundation yet. There are men out there that have more than 20-something people, and it's all on the Maury Povich show, or or all those dysfunctional shows that are shown on television every day. And what a life we have. When Young and the Restless and General Hospital has followed us for eons, centuries, and we're just following people who are having affairs and stealing, committing murder. All that is on television, but it's part of some people's lives because they don't have a life beyond television. The idiot box, I call it. And I used to listen to a lot of Dick Gregory, and he used to call it television, meaning that it's going to tell you a lie if you believe in it. Kind of like you are what you surround yourself with. And educators usually read a lot of books, but it doesn't mean that they're living. It doesn't mean that they've lived some of those opportunities. It really doesn't. But the real deal is that we, as a people, it's time for us to engage ourselves in the political arena, which public policy is political, and public policy means that taxes and the allocation of taxes and how those resources really generally fund down to the local level. Because if you have public school systems who do not hold themselves accountable for all children being engaged, but know this, they don't have to if you're not there. If you choose not to stand up and question as to the success or failure of a program, then it is on you. So if your grandchildren don't have those resources some 20 years from now, it's because you didn't show up. We all have to show up now. Now's the time. This is the time and the moment in life where we all have a personal responsibility to request the information and to see the outcomes of the voting. I mean, how many black people are actually voting in local communities? And if there's undervote, and the number of people who graduated or who didn't graduate, the number of people who have employment or who are not employed, the number of people who receive public assistance, and then the disaggregated data to determine who and how the public services are benefiting people. I mean, there's something to think beyond the bedroom, and there's something to think beyond, the boardroom. All people in America, if we the people make a difference, and if you can send your child off to be in a war to protect the backs of all of us, then know that our backs in America should be protected equally. And they all have a personal responsibility to stand up. This Facebook, difficult to, I want to say, build consensus. But I've been out on Facebook for a long time. And I've been to many, many board meetings. I've been to state board meetings. I've been to county board meetings. I've been to, city meetings. I've been to community meetings. And I've been to, the Urban League. I've been to what? I've looked. I'm looking to get in a lane. But when everybody's so siloed off and no one's working together, it's very difficult. I would just like to understand what is happening and where we've come from, Brown versus the Board of Education. How did that work in the state of California? Okay, the 1964 Civil Rights, how did that work for our people? And if we have a Black Caucus, I demand that they ask those questions from city to city to understand how the federal allocations are impacting the Black people, how the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment actually made a difference in the lives of Black people. We need to understand the impact of social services in our lives. And that's just real. So until later on, maybe I'll come back later on today, because you know what? I need to stir the conversation. People really need to start thinking differently, thinking out of the box, because the price of freedom has never been free. And if you get caught up and you become part of the harvest, you have to work to get out of the harvest. You have to work to not be somebody else's paycheck. That's have to work. You have to work towards that. And you have to step out there, because step out there on faith, because that's what life's about. If you have faith, faith moves mountains. The faith of a little mustard seed. We are still here, some 400 and something years later, and we will still be here tomorrow. And when they check out, maybe we'll all check out together. But it's not going to be anyone determining that singly, singularity, only a few of us will make it. No, it's all or none. But e pluribus unum, too many and too many, there are one or whatever. You hear all those little sayings, but does it stick in the brain? No. The only things that really stick in the brain is how you are able to be successful. And you have to keep pushing towards making yourself the most important person in the world. You always need to understand that somebody said syllabus are necessary when you are serving different masters. You're only serving one. And I feel, you could, money is the root of all evil, as they say. But guess what? I've never been in a situation where my needs were not met, and I didn't have to worry about it. I prayed about it, and those things seem to take place. And so I'm in a good situation. I hope that all of you are in a good situation. And if you're not, you have to work towards stability, making the choices that, there's a process established. But if you can't read and write, if you don't follow the process, you can't engage in the process, and it doesn't work for you. You can't pretend that you can take a vacation and party and party and party, and that has no effect on you. It's a grind, and it's a consistent grind. It was a grind for me to ensure that my children had a basic education. Don't think that life has been easy. When my youngest son, when I realized that he was not talking the way he should be, and that he had the problem, that I needed to figure out what was going on. Then, because I had a middle child, that I had to figure out what was going on with him. But, every child has a different learning ability, and every child can learn. And if you can give a child a video game and they can figure that out, why can't they figure the public education system out? That's what you need to understand. All people learn, but they all learn in different ways. And the public education system is there to support them in the manner in which they need. But you don't get what you don't ask for. And you just don't get what you don't understand you can have. And that's just real. Why else would we look at across the spectrum, or look at all the different ethnicities across the nation, and understand that African American children are below special education children? But special ed is not the worst thing in the world. I consider special education Cadillac of all educational resources. My son had speech and language development, he had social skills, he had all kind of group, OT had, whatever he needed is what we talked about, and how we arranged those services to be paid for out of the general fund. And that's how special ed is paid for, out of the general fund in the public education system. That money comes from tax dollars going, and it's based on the federal allocation that people actually get. And so the dollars are there. What's not there is the people who understand that they're entitled to them. The people who pretend that being on the yellow bus is some kind of dysfunctional thing. Well, hey, my son rode the bus until he graduated. But guess what? He rode the bus to school, I picked him up, and I brought him lunch every day. And thank God, every time there was a problem, I was right there. I would see children sitting in the office daily who look like me. But guess what? I'm not their parent. I can't do that level of advocacy. And in America, if you're not doing it, then it's not getting done. So we as a people who have a personal responsibility to be successful and generate success for our tribes also have a personal responsibility to understand that the lane has to be created after 1964 Civil Rights Act, and whatever else happened in the federal government, it didn't really matter. Today, I'm equal to any person that I see on the street. And if I have the money, I can do whatever I want to do. I don't have to ask permission. And see, it's this permission thing that some people believe that you have to ask for. But no, you don't have to have a permission to speak. But you do have a personal responsibility to speak out on all of the life lessons that you have learned and the challenges. And it's almost as if it's a book, because reading is fundamental. It's fundamental because sharing of knowledge is fundamental, because you can't grow if you're not willing to take the trials and tribulations laid before you. And believe me, that's what it meant, trials and tribulations. Until you get it done, you can't do anything. Until you cross that path, you can't move forward. We as a people have to move forward, but we have a problem. And our problem is, how do we communicate across the most affluential people to the least? Because believe me, ghetto is out there, and I'm not playing. I mean, there are people that just start totally street, but there are people all colors that are totally street. I don't see a lot of Asians leaving their people out there to beg, and I rarely see Hispanics out there. But here in Las Vegas, it's a little bit different story, because there is like a 47% graduation rate across all races, but African Americans are what 1 or 2%. I'm trying to get it when you only have seven children to graduate with the UC standard. And so communication is the one thing in America that if you have and you can communicate effectively, you're an effective communicator. You can share a message. But not everybody has the ability to communicate effectively. It's a challenge, is what it is. But we all need to slow down and look around and understand the picture. The picture is that I'm living in Las Vegas, and there are 15,000 youth that are homeless downtown in Las Vegas every night. That's how it was. But then COVID hit. But then the mayor here was trying to lodge infractions for people who didn't have a place to stay. But actually, I was watching that in California before I left. For the homeless population in Sacramento was a real issue for the mayor there, and still is. But what do you do with undereducated people? What do you do when you've basically stolen from them their dreams? What do you do when those people have no vision? For lack of vision, the people are perishing. They're perishing because they don't have anything. Their parents didn't have anything to give them. We have to go back 30 years. And I remember, I'm 62, but when I go back 30 years, that's not even enough. When I go back till I was in high school, more than 40 years ago, there were women that were having babies. And I remember there was an 8-year-old in Oak Park that her mother made her have the baby because she was around there having sex. And so, you can't tell people that they can't have sex. Once they had sex, it's just real. And so we have people who are molesting children, and children who don't know right from wrong because they're coming from families who are doing disgusting things, and people who are children who are broken children, like I said, committing suicide at 8 years old. And the nation's not talking about it. There are so many documentaries that talk about the struggles of my people who look like me. But my grandfather had a 3rd grade education, and he could build a house and order enough wood to understand what it took to build that house. And he didn't have a college education. So, credentials in America, they are what they are. They're worth what they're worth. And they're only worth something if you can make a difference. We all have a personal responsibility to make a difference. I make a difference every day with whatever I choose to do. And my children were successful. And I have helped children. But guess what? You can't help a broken person who doesn't want to put anything towards being unbroken. People have to have a desire to do better. And it's hard to do better sometimes. But if you learn what's working for you, then you need to do what's working for you. And if you have children, you have to try to do your best so that they can be successful. But you have to make yourself whole first so that you can be successful. Because really, broken people have children without thinking, without understanding that there's a personal responsibility for having children. Broken people, we want to talk about the right to life, and we want to ensure that everybody has an opportunity to choose whether to have a child. But God gives you a child. It's only God. And it is God. And it's only God. And so the deal is that when we don't think about the consequences of providing for a family, and to understand that once you have a choice of creating a family, that you didn't plan to educate, that you didn't plan to understand what the system was. And I know you didn't plan, because guess what? I didn't plan. But as I have processed through my journey, what I've understood is that participation and engagement in the arena that we're living in, that we were born in, is critical. And people who engage in the system and participate in the system are educated and can function. But people who depend on the system and understand basically how it works, but not really how it works, are barely sustaining themselves. But I'm going to tell you, the last family I was working with, I had to back off because the mother thought that her son should have a high school diploma. Well, this child just happened to be at a third grade level. It means absolutely nothing to me. Third grade level means nothing to me, because refusing to do work in high school because you can't do the work is real. But when it only is the only thing that you're graded by, that's the only offer of support that is being collected now. We can't pretend that willful defiance is not an issue in America, and it was not an issue. It was an issue under the Obama administration. He had written some laws and he had suggested some things that should happen. He took away the waiver, He took away the waiver process, and he took away the hold harmless clause. And it's written in law, but the states are still not following it because they don't have to right now because of COVID. Thank God for COVID, right? But what COVID also has taught us is that we should have been participating in a different level. And having one black person on a board means absolutely nothing if black people don't come to the board meeting. Having one black person that is the mayor means absolutely nothing if the black people don't come to the city. And just one black person serving in Congress, just like we had a black president, meant absolutely nothing if the black people couldn't stand up in America. So, if you ain't got time, don't think things are going to change for you, because it's not. But nobody knows, and no one knows, what's really happening. Because the real deal is, until we understand that we have to be more engaged in the process, nothing will ever change for us. So in America, I would encourage you all to stand up and shake off whatever's standing on the back of your back. Because believe me, our children have a ton of people who are weighted on their backs. And our children are not graduating. Our children are going to prison. And when they talk about the prison pipeline, we don't need to talk. If we understand Plessy versus Ferguson actually happened, and then we understand that we're not in the boardroom. Understand, I don't care what they say. I don't care what historical facts have said. Today, when I say something, it means something. Today, because I've chosen to stand up, it means something to me. And if it means something to me, it should mean something to you if you have children. I don't have grandchildren, but I have great nieces and great nephews. And for them, I'm going to participate in public society. And if people don't appreciate it, well, too bad. Too bad that there are so many people who have jobs that have no outcomes. We shouldn't have public schools where we have 80% failure rate. 80% of the children are not going to be meaningfully employed or engaged. In Europe, if you're not going to be at a certain level, they got something for you. You're going to do a certain job, and that's what you're going to do. You're going to get taught that school at 8th grade. You're going to go into that program, and that's what you're going to do. In Japan, I believe it's the same way. And until we step up in America saying that at 8th grade, if you're not reading, you're not going to be a doctor, you're not going to be a lawyer, and basically you're going to have a choice to have a skill. And skill-based learning is what we have to have, because we have to have more people that have a desire to live and not work at McDonald's. Come on now. Did you dream? Was that your dream in life, to work at McDonald's? Well, we have older people who are working at McDonald's, not because they choose to, but because they have no other choice, because they have to have an income. The deal is that America is established, and guess what? Everything works about America that's supposed to work if you understand what the rules say. Social Security works, disability works. I can't say that my retirement would have worked through Los Rios Community College because it was a racist environment there. I didn't have any support, and it doesn't really matter. My injuries came from on the job, and at that time is when I had my youngest child was pregnant, and the toxic chemicals, I believe, had a hard time on his body or whatever. You never know what you're working in. But when you're standing in the stuff and it stinks, understand it's time to get up and take a shower. So we're standing in the stuff, and every day our young people are out there saying Black Lives Matter, but guess what? Half of them don't have high school diplomas. What do they have to look forward to besides what's really happening? No education means that people are afraid of you. They have no idea what you will do when you choose to stand up and you're in a conflict with someone who has no skills, because communication is everything. And if people take it the wrong way, there was an officer I listened to this morning. He got pulled over. But you know, it was that male ego. Two male egos dealing with each other. But the deal is he was a law enforcement officer. He knew exactly what to say. But fortunately, he pulled away. But it could have went wrong at any time, because it does go wrong for our children. And if we don't teach them how to get out of those situations right now, we're dealing with people who have been trained to deal with people with an 8th grade level. They are 8th grade at the issuance of being command people. People are commanding and ordering you to comply. Why is it that black people are the only people that really have to comply? Why is it if you don't comply, death is an option from a society in which you're supposed to be free in, living free, having the right to have freedom of choice, freedom of religion, freedom, but then they can come in certain people's house and just kill them because they suspect that they're making money with an illegal substance. I mean, they might be making money. They want to control the money. It's all about the money. It's all about the Benjamins, as they say. But if you can sell, sex, and sex sells, and we all know it, and we don't complain about that. We don't complain about a lot of things, but we're not complaining about the right things. We all need to speak on just where we are. And because COVID-19 has exposed where all of us really are, people who have been sitting in the lap of luxury have a personal responsibility. Stand up and say, hey, wait a minute. I might have some grandchildren out there that might need some of those public services. And we cannot afford to have people who are just sitting up on the system who are not being productive. Because welfare fraud is still welfare fraud. And so if you have a system that's not educated, that's wrong. And that's just real. You have to be able to measure the maintenance of outcomes, the maintenance of effort. That is taxation without representation if you're just dumping the system with deficient people. Well, I'm going to sign up for now, and I'll probably come back later. But I wish you all have a great day, and I want to encourage you. Stand up. Don't let people just stand on your back. Know that our voices across the nation are all critical at this moment in time in life. And I encourage you to just be heard. Until later, I'm signing off. Have a great day. Mary, hello. Great to see you. Maybe after the COVID, we'll see each other again.